Hey WC Students family, and welcome to our first installment of TBH. This is our attempt at trying to intersect our faith and our culture and just being able to talk honestly about different topics and issues that are going on in our lives and the stuff that we see going on and we don't really have answers for, but just a place for us to be able to have honest, safe conversations to talk through those things. And that's what our hope is with this one. And in light of everything that's going on in our world today, we felt like it would be really important for us as we launch this to talk about race and to talk about just the struggles that we're seeing in our world today and how the church is responding or hasn't responded, and what we as Christians should be doing in light of everything that's happening in our world. And to be honest with you, I really struggled to even make these videos because for me, my story isn't the same, and it's not the typical black person story, and because of that, I've been really apprehensive of even wading into these waters. And but then I think about all the conversations that I've had over the last few weeks, and I feel like it's either a former student or a current student or a friend of mine that just calls and asks, and I love it because it's all of the stuff that's been taking place, and we've lived through a lot of these different waves of just racial tension and protesting and making statements. But this is the first time I can ever remember that people took to really seriously ask me real questions and honest questions, and want to listen to my experiences. And so in light of all of those things that have been happening over the last few weeks for me, I felt like it was really important that I quit dragging my feet and open up this conversation, this dialogue for you guys, because you need a safe place to be able to process what you're seeing, and what does the Bible in our faith tell us about this and how we should be fighting this. And I hope that by me sharing my experiences and by me bringing in people in subsequent videos to share their experiences, it helps you to kind of get a sense of what this is all about, who we are as believers and how we're to interact in this conversation. And eventually, as we talk about other serious things, that you guys would feel safe asking questions. And so today, I just really wanted to tell you, like I said before, these experiences aren't, my story isn't typical, in that I can't remember a time where I felt like I was treated differently or poorly because I was black, and specifically by people of different color. I do remember that some of my biggest struggles growing up, especially in my formative years in middle school and high school, was that I was seen as not black enough. I remember in middle school being told that I was the white kid, or they called me an Oreo, or they would have there would be these group hangouts, and only black people were allowed to be there, and so I wasn't allowed to go. And those were formative for me, and for any middle schooler, that's shaping their identity, and there's trying to figure out who they are and what their purpose is, all of these questions that middle schoolers ask. And for me, as a 6th, 7th, and 8th grader who had friends who were white and had an elementary school, but then got to middle school and started living in this tension and not really knowing what to do because I'm 13, and I just really struggled with it. I really didn't know. I remember having to have a conversation with my dad about it because I didn't know where I belonged, and I got that I was different from my white friends, but we shared a lot of things in common, and so it didn't really matter that my skin color was different because we liked comic books or we liked to play basketball, but it was in this tension in middle school when I really struggled with just why was I considered not black enough because the way that I talked or the things that I liked. And And so it was hard for me. That was a really big struggle for me. And then even in high school, like I remember like thinking we had kind of moved past that as we get older, but then you realize, sometimes middle school and high school are just the same thing with issues even more heightened. And I liked this girl, and we were sitting next to each other in the computer lab, and I remember her like leaning over to me and just talking about, man, you're like one of the whitest black people I've ever met. And I was like, well, all right, I guess we're not gonna date now, or at least for me to try. That wouldn't have changed anything. I was super awkward then anyways. But like this whole idea that like people saw me as they didn't see me as a black person because of some of the things that I said or the things that I did, and that was hard for me, and like that would be formative for me, especially growing up when it comes to like race relations, because it felt like people that really wanted to be my friend or accept me for who I was were the white people, and not weren't the black people. And so like for me, like in wading into this conversation, like this is my foundation. These were my experiences growing up, and even to have like people even today like say, when I say that I didn't really experience racial discrimination, think that I was either ignorant or a liar, like that's hard, because like I think back on my experiences, and I know that like they're different, and I hope that like you're starting to see that, like as you talk to different people, if you listen to what's out there, like not everybody's got the same story. Not everybody has the same story about anything, much less like when it comes to their experiences with something so heavy as this. And so for me, like this wasn't, like this has been, like it's been a way for me to like kind of process this whole season, this whole time, for me to process what I experienced growing up. And so while like I didn't experience stuff directly, like I remember there were times when like some indirect stuff happened, and my confusion and not really sure how to handle it. Like I remember my senior year of high school. So this is like in the spring semester, we were doing our weekly Bible study, and it was to the season where our youth minister had left, and so like I got to be in charge of all that stuff. And I brought in somebody to speak who was a year older than us, but was in our youth group as well. And like we were buddies. We hung out a lot. We played a lot of basketball together, and like I thought we were pretty close. He was probably one of the guys like in the grade above me that I felt like I was closest to. And I remember him like giving our talk for our Wednesday night programming, and he said that like he confessed to like our student ministry that he struggled with racism and racist thoughts. And I remember just being shocked, because I didn't know, like I never felt that. Like I never felt like he treated me any differently. I never felt like we were two separate, like he only like hung out with me for like only on the basketball court, like, or that he only cared about, how well I was playing that game, but like he cared about me. And so like it was hard to sit there and listen to that, thinking, and then again it brings back all of these questions, like what about me? Like why am I so different? Why is my experience so different? This guy that I was friends with is saying that he struggled with racist thoughts and prejudice towards certain groups of people, which I was part of that group of people, but then like I didn't feel that. And did I miss something? But or was I just blind to it? And so like I remember like really kind of struggling through that, and me as an 18-year-old kid, I didn't take the time to ask those questions. I wish I could now, but I haven't talked to this guy in the better part of like 15 years. But like I wish I would have known. I wish I would have had the courage to ask then, like to wade into the waters of these tough questions. And so that was a struggle. I also remember, when Michelle and I first started dating, and just the tension that like that brings into any you already have like the natural tension that comes into any relationship, but then the added tension of like us being an interracial couple, like there were just a lot of questions on the onset of this, and for her family, like what was it, thought not necessarily for her like immediate family, but like for her extended family, like what is that, like how are they going to see these things, and how they're going to see Michelle bringing a black guy home, and not necessarily like her generation, but just some of our older generation, like our grandparents, and questions about like what our kids are going to experience. You know, they're not going to be fully black, they're not going to be fully white, and so like what is that, you know, what does that mean for Lincoln, Truman, and Hayes, who weren't even, you know, born yet or even thoughts in our mind, but these are the type of questions we were having to answer like early on in our relationship. And I remember there was this the first time I ever got to meet like Michelle's extended family, probably one of the most awkward moments of my life, mostly because I went to a wedding shower, and Michelle, I'd never been to a wedding shower, but Michelle promised that like there were going to be some guys there that I could talk to. Her dad was going to be there. Her cousin Jake, who got married, was going to be there. Her uncle was going to be there. And when we rolled up, none of them were there. They all had dipped and went to Home Depot. And so it was just like me and a bunch of ladies. And I was like, all right, well, here we are. I'm here. You know, like we're gonna have fun no matter what. And I remember getting the chance to sit next to her grandmother, and Grandmother Mary is one of the sweetest, coolest old ladies I ever got to meet. And I remember us sitting down, just eating whatever hors d'oeuvres or whatever they were serving that day. But I just remember the conversation, and we just sat there and we talked about the church, and we talked about hymns, and we talked about our favorite like hymns, old school hymns, and we talked about like the organ, but it was just this really sweet conversation. And I think from that moment on, like her family was like, okay, like this is going to be an okay thing. Like, we don't have to stress and worry about what people are going to say or what people are going to think, because Grandmother Mary, the matriarch of their family, she loved me as one of her own, and Michelle and I had just freshly started dating at that point in time. And so there are these negative moments, and when it comes to like my formative years of like racial like issues, but there are also all these positive things too, and especially when it comes to like police stuff. And I know that that's kind of like the highlight of all of this. And for me, like as I thought back through my time and my encounters with police officers, like I can't remember a time when like I was like genuinely concerned that for my life. And I think part of that is because like when I was in high school, my mom made me join this organization called the Youth Police Advisory Council. And I didn't want to do it, but she was like, it looks good on your college application. And I was like, all right, Mom, whatever, you know, like all of those things that your parents make you do, you should do it because it works out really well. But like I remember having to go to this thing, and I don't remember much about it. I don't remember what they told us to do. I don't remember what they asked us. I don't remember how long I had to do it. But what I do remember about it is that like we would have to, the thing that was the most important for the chief of police at the time, and that he wanted to get across, is that we did not, as teenagers, we did not have to fear police officers. Like that was the goal. And I think, yeah, we probably made some suggestions or something like that, which I do not remember, but I do remember that. I remember that was something that they really hoped would come out of this council. And I'll actually, my mom actually sent me a picture recently, and so I'll post it so you can see what young teenage Floyd looks like. But I don't remember much about it, but I do remember that. I remember that was their goal, is to get us interacting with police officers so that we wouldn't feel intimidated and scared, that we would believe that, you know, that in our interactions they are trying to help us. And And so for me, that is coming from a place where that was part of my formative experience growing up, like that's helped me in how like I approach encounters with police officers, and that's not the same for everyone, and it's not everybody got to be a part of a youth advisory council. Not everybody has had like positive experiences with police officers, but for me, I think that this being my first encounter was really formative and really helpful for me. And you know, and I've been pulled over multiple times. I listen, if my mom is listening to this, I may or may not have been speeding on some of those tickets. And I've had inspection stickers and registration stickers that have been out of date, and the one that really gets me is I was driving in the left-hand lane in like one of those 2-lane highways where you're left lane is for passing only, which I thought was only a suggestion, not necessarily like a real law. Yeah, I got a fat ticket for that one. But there was this one story that I remember, and for many of you guys, you've probably heard me tell it because I use it as an anecdote all the time for crying my way out of a ticket. But when all of this police brutality stuff happens, I always come back to this story in my own mind and in my own like prayer time and time of reflection, because it was probably like the thing that really helped and has solidified how I see police officers. And that came from I was 20. I was leaving my girlfriend's house at the time, and I was cutting through a neighborhood, and I may or may not have been speeding. or rolled through a stop sign, you know, and so Mom, if you're listening, may or may not. But yeah, so I was speeding, and I rolled through a stop sign, and this cop pulled me over. And so it's 11:30 at night, and like this would be the first time I'd ever been pulled over. And so the only kind of like, you know, I guess like frame of reference that I had for when you get pulled over by a cop is from like TV shows, and they ask for a license and registration. So I'm reaching in my glove box, it's nighttime, and to get my insurance card out so that I can give it to the officer. And as I'm like doing that and rolling down the window at the same time, and I start to hear like, put your hands where I can see him, put your hands where I can see him. And when the cop comes over on I believe it was my passenger side, he has his hand on his holster, and he is yelling at me, and my initial reaction is to throw my hands out the window, and he's like, no, don't do that, put your hands on the steering wheel. And I'm like, okay. And you know, he immediately starts questioning what was I reaching for. I tell him it's my registration. He says, do you have a gun in the car? And I'm like, no, I don't. But at the time, I did have a rifle bullet and a shotgun bullet in my car, and the officer was like, why do you have bullets in your car? And I'm like, well, there's this whole story about us taking a group of students shooting and at somebody's ranch, and it was like this whole thing. And he's like, are you lying to me? And I'm like, no sir, I'm not. And he's like, he takes my license and my registration, he goes back to his car. When he comes back, he asks me to step out of my car. And you know, I don't know the rules of whether or not why you're supposed to step out of your car or not, but he was essentially he's planning on searching my car. And when I get out of my car, there are 2 other cop cars there. More cops have shown up, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to jail for having bullets in my car. And I was terrified. I tried to introduce myself to another cop that was there, and he was like, sir, just go sit on the side. And so I'm sitting on the side of the road at, you know, after 11 at night, and I'm like, I'm going to jail, and my mom's gonna kill me for getting in trouble, because she had told me to take the bullets out of my car, and I was like, nah Mom, I'm fine, and I didn't do it. And so then at that point I lose it. Like, I'm crying, like I'm like, man, I don't know what's gonna happen next. And then the first officer comes and he tells me to go get back in my car. And while the other officers leave, this cop, and this is probably the point that like I remember the most, is that this officer came and he came and sat next to my car, and like with my door wide open, and I'm just sitting there kind of like catch my composure. And he asked like, did I understand why he reacted the way that he did? And I was like, no. And he was like, well, a couple of weeks ago they had, you know, searched the car and they found all of these assault rifles in the back of it. And he's like, you know, for me, I was scared because I didn't know what you were reaching for. And you know, you could have had anything. And it was a moment like that where he would like sit down and like actually like talk me through like what happened and why our situation was so intense. Like, I don't remember that cop's name. I don't remember anything about him, but I remember that. I remember him taking the time to like sit down and process what took place in this moment. Like, he didn't have to. Like, he gave me, I ended up getting a warning. He was like, I think you've learned your lesson for the night. And like, he didn't have to like, he didn't have to sit there and talk to me. He could have given me my warning. He could have given me my ticket because I deserved it. But he didn't. But like, it's moments like that, like for me, like that have shaped my view and my understanding and my experiences. Because of the experiences I've had. The experiences I've had of discrimination, the experiences that I had with police officers. The reason I am who I am today are because of these experiences. And so like, as you understand, as you get to hear my heart and like understanding that, I think that like for us as we navigate into this conversation, like we have to be listening to each other's experiences. We have to be willing to put aside like our understanding or our assumptions and allow people to tell you like what happened to them. Because for all of us, our experiences are going to shape the way that we view this world. And if we're not allowing people to share their experiences, how are we going to understand how they view the world? And so like, for me, those are the things that like I went through. And those are the things that have been formative for me and have shaped me to be who I am today. And whether it is by providence of the Lord or his protection in places, I'm very thankful for the perspective I have to wade into a conversation like this, because it is I think different from a lot of people, and it's been helpful like to reflect and to have like honest conversations with friends of mine and who have shared the same experiences and who haven't, as they talk through, as we kind of talk through how do we navigate this, not just for ourselves, but for the people that we're in charge of leading.